welcome back to Foreign Correspondents. I'm Somi Sorang with our panel of foreign journalists. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome to the program. Now, the massive women's rally that's been taking place at Hyehwa Station in Central Seoul since May 19th is grabbing headlines across the country. The organizers of the protest estimate that roughly 12,000 people took part in the first rally, which then jumped to around 22,000 on June 9th and 60,000 on July 7th.
남성 중심 차별 수사 각성하고 규탄하라! 규탄하라!
So in this week's edition of Foreign Correspondents, we'll be talking about the Hyehwa Station protest, the so-called corset-free movement, as well as other forms of feminist activism here in South Korea. So Elise, are you familiar with the events that led up to the Hyehwa Station protests?
I am. As a correspondent here for the last 3+ years, it's been fascinating to watch women really try and rise up against a society that's been patriarchal for as long as it's existed. And what sparked these are the first and second largest women's protests in South Korean history,
right,
which is fantastic. We've seen more and more activism from women over the past few years, including after what happened at Gangnam Station a couple of years ago, after a tragic killing of a woman there by a misogynist. And so what happened in this case was an eruption about spy cam. So for a lot of people in your audiences around the world may not be familiar with what's happening here. There's a phenomenon called molka, in which women are being secretly filmed with cameras as small as lighters or hidden inside lighters, hidden in small objects and walls. They're secretly filmed everyday activities such as being inside a locker room or being in a public restroom.
불법 촬영물 유포자를 징역형으로만 처벌하도록 하는 등
So this was an eruption about how the justice system treats spy cam footage. That is, in this case, the roles were reversed.
Right.
What sparked the incident was the roles were reversed. There was actually a woman who planted a fake spy cam and shot video of a naked art model, a man. And she was immediately prosecuted. And what women then erupted in is that in most cases, in the vast majority of cases, the victims of spy camera behavior are women. And yet the incidences of prosecution of the men who are actually behind these crimes are very small. You saw the reaction in May, then you saw follow-up reaction in June, and this has become an issue that's become, at the forefront of local media here, and less so at international media.
Right. Now, the Hyehwa Station protest also led to some backlash over the controversial and provocative signs on the pickets that people have been using, some of the rally-goers have been using. Some of them shouted death chants directed at President Moon Jae-in and depicted the male genitalia as an instrument of repression. Meanwhile, online, some members of Walmart, a South Korean web community supporting radical feminism, created a controversy of their own, defacing a Catholic communion wafer to protest against the religion's stance on women, as well as openly mocking the deaths of certain celebrities and independence activists. So, Matt, do you think some of the slanderous slogans that you see at the Hyehwa Station protests and the online activities of some of these radical feminist communities online, such as WOMAD, can they be seen as an extension of the larger women's rights movement?
I think so. In any movement, in any grassroots movement, there are going to be extremes, and those are the things that the media will focus on. I think this is really an extension of a broader concern in the country about gender equality. In any protest, there will be extremes, and those will distract from the broader issue that people are trying to explain. I can think back to the United States with the Wall Street movement, with the Occupy Wall Street movement, where what got focused on were people who wouldn't move and got arrested and dragged by the police, but it really led to a broader conversation about income equality in the United States. Sure, there are going to be distractions in any protest, but I feel like those distractions drive media coverage, which makes people think about the larger issue.
Right. Fabian, have there been similar protests or similar online communities where the form of feminism have been radical or aggressive as WOMAD has been in Germany?
Let's say for the women's movement in Germany, like some viewpoints that were viewed as radical, now they're like totally a given. For example, in the 60s, as a woman, you were not allowed to own your own bank account. When you change your job, you quit your job, you need the approval of your husband. I mean, now we laugh about it, but also Germany was very, very patriarchal, and there's still a gender pay gap. I mean, some viewpoints that I think would consider radical on social media, for example, is say, oh, you as a man, you're not allowed to have any opinion. You should, basically just shut up in that discussion. Then I think it's the wrong approach, I guess.
Right.
But I want to add one thing to the radical, you mentioned them, radical feminist groups. I don't want to belittle everything, and death threats, of course, are not okay. But we shouldn't forget the cause and effect here. I think it started with an online community called Ilbe, with exclusively male, mostly in their 20s, 30s, who were really lashing out about calling a Korean woman Kim Chinyo, it's a very
derogatory
term, yeah. And that caused basically for another online community for females called Megalia, who were actually using similar slurs towards men. And once they directed those terms also to homosexual men, there was a big discussion. And then this splinter group WOMAD, which is more radical or more extreme, came out of that. And so for example, when they demolished that religious symbol, like the Catholic wafer.
Yeah.
Of course, there are protests, there's police. But when, for example, Catholic priests, harassed or raped women, in those cases, it took a very long time to reveal that. And or for example, it took almost 10 years for the authorities to crack down on Soranet, a porn, a platform for revenge porn.
Yeah, where many of the porn that you mentioned are posted.
Yeah, so in that sense, I think they expose some double standards. I mean, yeah.
Okay. What about in the US? Are there similar communities in the US that are very active?
I would say that feminism and the debate about feminism has become a lot more nuanced in the United States. The difference between Korea and a lot of the Western world is that Korea, while it codified in its constitution equality between the sexes, because of its fast economic growth from, as poor as sub-Saharan Africa in the 1960s to now one of the richest nations in the world, sociologists tell me that Korea essentially did not experience a adolescence as a country when it comes to its society.
Right.
And these societal issues, such as the extreme gender imbalance in the society, are now getting brought to the forefront and debated out, despite it already being a rich country. And so, and in the US, the women's rights struggle was a lot more organic in that it had to be fought for, like women's suffrage, the right to vote, and the right to own your own property and all these things that came over time. They actually incrementally were given to women after struggle.
Right.
In Korea, it's different. It was sort of like, oh yes, you have all of these things because we are a democracy now. However, women didn't actually get to fight for them. And so in the actual practice, of society and culture, women still remain treated unequal. And so now you're seeing a lot of reaction, especially to areas in which women are victimized by violence. The vast majority of victims of violent crime are women. They're living in a lot of fear. They are especially living in fear now because of cameras and things like that. And now you're seeing the eruption. So it's really interesting to watch the differences because feminism came about over time, right? And then women's rights came about over time. The struggle, this is in the United States and the Western world. Here, because it's kind of backwards. Everything was guaranteed, but now the actual societal change and the actual cultural change is being fought for.
Then do you think overall, aside from some of the negative aspects, that overall these Hyehwa station protests and things have actually benefited women's rights?
Absolutely. I mean, anytime we see women being able to come out of the shadows and voice their own concerns and voice their own fears, that's a step forward. And you can debate on the margins about the tactics, which actually really turn off a lot of women and then make them more fearful, right? So it could be like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But in general, feminism and the history of feminism around the world has been women being able to speak up about things that used to bring them shame. Abortion, miscarriage, a lot of things that are just uncomfortable because the society was dominated by men who were uncomfortable about things, their periods, for example. Now you're seeing women being able to speak up a little bit more. They're still protesting with masks on, which is to say there's still a huge level of fear in this society.
Masks, sunglasses, scarves, yeah.
Right, and that says something, right? That shows the gender imbalance in and of itself. It shows the remaining fear. But the fact that they're voicing their concerns, I think women in this society should be applauded.
Now, on the topic of where are the male feminists, on the picket signs, there were some comments that express hatred and resentment, anger towards men. Do you think it's inevitable that we see some misandry within feminism?
I would say in a very polarized society, it produces polarized activists. And I think misandry starts, for example, when you basically suspect every man of being a potential rapist or potential harasser, and idealize every woman as an angel or victim. Because I think this point of view actually is not really feminist, because I mean, at least let's say from a German point of view, there was a lot of debate and fight for having emancipated women and strong woman figures. And if you say that women are totally helpless, they can't defend themselves, that's not really a mature view, I think. I mean, of course, it's a long way, and South Korea is, just starting. But I think, women should, rise up.
Right. Okay. Now let's move on to media coverage. Do you feel that the South Korea media covered the Hyehwa station protests in a fair, unbiased manner?
Well, I mean, about some details we could argue. They're always labeled as radical and extremists, and from what we talked about earlier, it's not so easy, it's not so black and white. Right. I think rather that media, their task is to reflect on themselves. For example, in top positions, all the bosses, editor-in-chiefs, they are male. When we go to the Seoul Foreign Correspondents Club, I mean, Elise, maybe you're sometimes the only woman there. When I ask for North Korea experts, getting quotes from experts 9 out of 10 times, or maybe 7 out of 10 times, it's always male people. And I think about those things we should reflect too. I mean, we are part of that society. We are not just, cannot only criticize what is happening around us and then don't reflect on ourselves.
Right, then going on from that, then should the media provide equal voice to both sides of the argument, or should they give a greater voice to women, seeing that they are usually underrepresented?
Well, when we get into both sidesism, I think that makes things far more scientific than they need to be. Because, for example, climate change is true. We know that the Earth is warming and it's caused by man. Should we give both sides to the people who believe that? Should we give 50-50 treatment? Korean society is dominated by men. All top levels of this society are dominated by men. So I don't think that's an argument that you can debate both sidesism, right? That's just reality. That's the way it is. So it's really about power, who has the power, how is it trying to be challenged, and what is your responsibility as a journalist to make sure that truth is reflected when power is trying to be challenged. I think that source diversity is incredibly important. I think that diversity in media or news organizations is important, especially at top ranks of leadership, because we would see the way stories being covered very differently. But making sure that different voices are being heard is also important. But I would say both sidesism is very tough. I don't know. I can't tell you, oh yes, you should say 75% of the story needs to be voices by women and 25% needs to be voices by men. I just don't know the correct answer to that. I would say the question is always responsibility. To whom are we being responsible? Be responsible to your audience. Be responsible to the truth. And I think it's incontrovertible also that Korea is a gendered society that is controlled by men. I don't think that that's something that's worth debating.
Okay. Now, when we talk about women's rights, activism, movements, and the media, we of course can't skip over the topless Facebook photo incident. So this past May, a feminist group took off their shirts in a symbolic gesture at a rally promoting women's rights and uploaded photos of this to their Facebook page. Facebook, in turn, citing company policy on nude photographs, took the pictures down and suspended the involved account. And days later, members of the feminist group protested the decision by staging a topless demonstration in front of Facebook Korea's headquarters. Facebook later recovered the deleted content and apologized. Matt, what are your thoughts on the topless demonstration in front of the Facebook Korea headquarters?
No, Facebook did the right thing by restoring the photos. They're a form of protest. They're not a form of pornography, which would be against their terms of service.
Right.
It's a remarkable thing to see something like that happen in small C conservative South Korea. And to see that passion that drove them to do that was pretty inspiring. But that's going to be interpreted by some people as too extreme, and it's going to give people heartburn, and maybe that's a good thing because people will talk about this issue more.
Now, these people, they were topless in a public area. So when the police were called on to the site, the police had to forcibly cover the topless women with blankets, which then led to complaints about police brutality. Do you think the police were justified in their actions?
No, not. I found the woman pretty courageous. I mean, we all created nude. Like, I mean, what's the problem with nudity? And just one more thing to the Mark Zuckerberg thing. I mean, you can even on Facebook you can deny the Holocaust, for example, and they will not be deleted. And I mean, woman's breast, or I mean, I could walk on the street topless, no problem at all. I mean, what's the big deal? I think the problem is like if men start to like tell women what they can do, cannot do, what they should wear or not wear, and that's a problem. And I think it's highly problematic if the police, covers the woman with blankets.
Then what about the media? Because the South Korean media, in covering this incident, they censored the women's breasts. Do you think that was the right call?
You have to think about these news organizations too, and in Korea, we see things that you don't see in the United States in terms of censoring. When someone's handcuffed, for example, they'll blur that. So I think it's sort of understandable that they might blur that out. Also, children might be watching, in the United States, if there was a topless protest, the raw video or imagery would not be shown. They would find a way, don't you think?
I think it's shown like from the backs, or there's just more there's like tasteful ways to do it without just like blurring out breasts. Yeah, exactly.
But I think they also have to follow the law. I don't know what the media regulations is. Are they allowed to show it or not? I think that's a major question. From a moral point of view, I mean, we show like, let's say news are brutal, like when we show killings of Syria, I mean, sometimes they're very graphic images. So if we show that, then why not? I mean, it's just a body of human beings.
Right.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next buzzword of feminism in Korea, which is called the anti or free corset movement. Now, as you know, a corset is an underwear garment designed to tighten a woman's torso to hold them in a thinner shape. The anti-corset movement here in Korea is about breaking free from the standards of beauty that the society has placed upon women. And more specifically, it means refusing heavy makeup, long hair, excessive dieting, and so on and so forth. Some advocates of the anti-corset movement upload pictures of mashed lipsticks and other cosmetics to their social media accounts, as well as selfies of themselves without makeup on or with a short haircut. The movement has obvious parallels to the no makeup movement seen in the United States. What do you think has triggered the free corset movement in Korea?
Well, I think people are just fed up because most of those beauty standards or beauty ideals for women are there to please men, and that's what I would argue. So this is kind of a sign of liberation, but only like a very early beginning sign, because usually it it shouldn't play any role. Like if a person wears makeup, wears earrings or whatsoever, really, who should care and who should judge about that?
Do you think this movement is more about the objectification of women or more about lookism in general, which is prevalent in society and affects women and men?
Yeah, I think lookism is definitely a problem. I've written about that before. It's also the cosmetics and things, these beauty standards are big business in Korea.
Right.
So it's not just men demanding that of people that they look at. I think it's the advertising agencies that promote these things. The government in some ways, with its promotion of K-pop, has propelled this beauty dynamic.
K-beauty is serious business worldwide.
Yeah, and there's it's not just locally. It's people come from China. There's our whole tourism packages to come to Myeongdong to buy Korean products. So I think it's a reaction to that. But certainly, lookism is an issue here. It's an issue everywhere, but it's particularly prevalent in Korea, in South Korea, compared to other Northeast Asian countries.
Okay. Now, some advocates of the free corset movement, they point fingers at other women who, for example, have long hair, like myself, or choose to wear makeup, saying that they are conformists.
So that's the thing. I mean, I support women being able to choose. And so that means if a woman wants to stay at home instead of work, they should be able to stay at home. And if a woman wants to have long hair or a woman wants to, do makeup in the traditional style or the style that K-pop artists like to do it, that's their choice.
Right.
And we can get into the reasons for why these choices exist. But like individual choice is fine. What I think that the feminist movement here needs to target are structures and the reasons why this is considered beauty. Like, why is this look considered desirable or attractive? And if we look back and the answer is, it's because K-pop artists look this way, then you have to ask, like, who's manufacturing K-pop? That's what movement should actually be targeting, rather than individual women who are like, I just want to choose this lipstick,
Okay, now let's move on to some other aspects. Some men, they habitually give compliments to women on their appearance, using phrases like beautiful, cute, hot. Do you think these otherwise innocuous comments is also a form of gender discrimination and repression?
Well, I think we should use our brain for that. I mean, it's not a question that you can easily answer with yes or no. I mean, first you should ask yourself, as a man, when you give a compliment, let's say, for example, for the media reporting, like women are always like, criticized or praised for their looks, but men usually don't. So you see there's something wrong. But for example, I mean, just before the show, sometimes I would say, you wear a nice jacket. I don't know, like maybe you think it's nice, maybe you think like, why Fabian complimenting me for like for my look? Maybe it's not right. I mean, it's you always should need like some empathy and ask yourself, is it right or not? But I mean, I would like to live in a society where you can make compliments and say something, that looks nice. And by the way, I also do that for men. Like when Matt wears a nice jacket, I would also say that, But sometimes for me, sometimes it's also annoying if you only get compliments about looks or so. But try to be, sensitive, I would say. Yeah.
Right. Now, the definition of feminism has evolved over time, and to a certain extent depends on where you live. So, Elise, what's your definition of feminism?
To me, feminism is about freedom. It's about being able to look and be however you want, or look and be however the rest of society gets to be. And women here in South Korea don't get to do that. They have to conform to very strict norms of how to behave and how to appear in public. And I think that people should be of many different sizes. We should have a society that has a lot more diversity, and it should be a lot more heterogeneous when it comes to appearance, so that's something that is understood and accepted more.
Okay.
I just believe that all people, all humans, should be able to be free and to express themselves in the way that they want.
Right.
And that obviously includes women.
Okay. And Fabian, what's your definition?
I totally agree on that definition. It's my definition too, and I would add that based on that definition, every man with some brain should be a feminist.
Okay. Do you think feminism is perceived differently in Korea compared to the US? The term feminism perceived differently in Korea compared to Germany?
No, actually, I would agree that that's different because it has a very strong negative connotation. Sometimes you would see K-pop singers or persons, celebrities, let's say, posting on Instagram that they're reading a feminist book
Right.
or wearing a feminist T-shirt, and then this would spark backlash where you think,
Right.
like, why? I mean, it's,
They have to take the picture down.
Yeah, I think there are many misunderstandings about what feminism is and what feminism isn't. But I mean, it used to be in Germany also the same. Like, feminism was like a negative term, but now it's different. Yeah.
Okay, we'll have to wrap the discussion up there. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you for your insight. Now, the discourse on women's rights and gender equality in Korea began in the late 1980s, but it's only recently that the society as a whole has begun talking about feminism. And we can only hope that the heated debate surrounding women's rights and gender equality will go on to serve as a solid foundation for a healthier society. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye.